Greetings, geeks, and welcome to another segment of our ongoing YouTube series. And this is Robin's Reading Rainbow, which many of you guys will know from the actual podcast. And this week we have a very interesting, I want to say it's a groundbreaking, revolutionary comic that changes the game in so many different ways, and it is a Valiant comic, Shadowman number 19. And Adam there is holding a copy of the comic.
So here it is on the cover, as you can see, guys and gals. We hope you gals are out there listening, reading along with us. But we have Shadowman number 19 featuring Aerosmith. Yep, this is a crossover of rock and roll and superhero comics. But, you talked about this being groundbreaking, Michael. Certainly not the first time this was done. I am a huge Kiss fan, and I have the Marvel Super Special printed in real Kiss blood. Oh. That's right. They dropped their blood into the ink vats, okay? So this is special, but this is where, the actual band were the heroes. They were getting their own comic. They were kind of being reinterpreted. It happened again when they reunited in the 90s and Todd McFarlane published Kiss Psycho Circus. I have all those issues. I was a religious purchaser at the store. But this one here, this has a real unique backstory.
Yeah, well, first, can you explain who Shadowman is? Because I, other than reading this particular issue, know nothing about the character, and I'd like to learn a little bit.
Yeah, so I went back, I read the first few issues to kind of get where was he at the beginning and where did he end up. Basically, he is a jazz musician in New Orleans named Jack Boniface. I don't know how they say it down in New Orleans. But he essentially takes a woman home one night after a gig, and she turns out to be some type of demon monster who bites him on the neck, and she gets chased away while he's passing out. When he wakes up, though, he starts noticing whenever it becomes night, he gets these strange feelings like he belongs in the night, and he calls it my night. And so he starts realizing he has powers. He starts stopping all these petty crimes around town. But he's stronger, he's faster, he's more agile. He could sort of float a little bit when he jumps, so he could jump farther, do things like that. And then he meets up with his housekeeper named Natty or Nettie, something like that, this old lady, and she tells him all about the voodoo and that he got infected with this dark power, and now he is this voodoo character called the Shadowman. And so she makes him his costume and everything, and it's supposedly that's his symbol, this symbol right here that's kind of strange. Is supposed to be his soul coming out through the shadows.
Okay.
So
I thought it was more like a kind of a voodoo doll type of a thing, because there's a heavy voodoo element to this comic that I noticed when I was reading through it. There's a voodoo doll, there's a shaman of some sorts, and let's put it this way. I was a bit confused. The art is actually pretty interesting. The art is pretty good. And it's not like some of the other Image comics where there's just nonstop action from the word go. There's a little bit more story involved, which I enjoyed. The one thing that I wanted to point out is, first of all, Steven Tyler's pretty jacked in this, which he's not really jacked in real life. And second of all, he's a master martial artist, which I found very interesting.
Hey, you got to do something when you're not on stage, right? We don't know. But so here's the thing. Who did know was one of the publishers at Valiant, one of the founders of Voyager Communications, who was the parent company of Valiant Comics, was Steve Mazarski.
Okay.
And Steve Mazarski was a lawyer who then became a rock and roll band manager, or vice versa. I don't know if he was doing them simultaneously or started in one or the other, but he was very proud that he managed the Allman Brothers band, who I guess our parents might have been fans of the Allman Brothers.
I like the Allman Brothers. Come on. You don't like Midnight Rider?
Okay, there you go. But then he also managed Aerosmith for many years.
Okay.
And so he had that connection to them. And he said that as he was getting into the comics industry, he realized there was a lot of crossover between rock and roll and comics in terms of fandom. You know, like people were into that. So he said, well, I've got this connection. Why don't I bring Aerosmith into this comic book continuity and make them the stars of this? Because I know the characters, I know what we could put forth in their personalities. So I'm sure if you're a super diehard Aerosmith fan, there's a lot of inside jokes here that you would get. Now, I think you and I both, Michael, we've said we enjoy Aerosmith. They were a huge part of the 90s.
And in this particular time, they were huge. They were pumping out new albums for the first time in a while right now. Like a lot was happening around Aerosmith, and it was kind of interesting about that. And as if you were to think of rock bands to meld with a comic, this was probably the right band at the right time to be in this story around this character.
Well, and here's a fun fact for you, Michael. Aerosmith already was on the road to having a connection to comic books after this, because do you know which member of Aerosmith did the theme song for the 1994 Spider-Man cartoon?
Was it Joe Perry?
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of knew that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's all Joe Perry guitar work there. So it's one of those things that's, they started here and it just carried forward after that, which is pretty neat. So
that's cool.
In this comic, what I like about it is, it says on the cover just featuring Aerosmith. I like that it doesn't just feature them for like 2 panels, like they're in the background.
They're almost on, I would say, almost every page. Like,
yeah.
At least Steven Tyler's on almost every page.
Yeah, it is introduced. It's interesting, featuring Steven Tyler and Aerosmith.
Yeah.
So he definitely wanted his name above the marquee there.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'm sure.
Definitely the face of the band.
So the first question I had for you was, in the very beginning of the issue, there's this like long-haired, redheaded guy in overalls and no shirt. And the weird thing about it is he's after locks of Steven Tyler's hair. Now, is this also the Shadowman, but like in his normal persona?
No. So the first they show the Shadowman talking to Aerosmith, and they're talking about how he used to jam with them, and they want him to like come on tour with them because he's such a great saxophonist. And he's like, nah, I like to be in New Orleans, But yeah, then there's this guy sneaking into Steven Tyler's dressing room, stealing his clothes, stealing a lock of his hair. And then meanwhile, there's also these zombie businessmen who come in, and they've been resurrected. They were dead and they're now alive again. So they're attacking the band. So literally, Steven Tyler's having a knockdown, fight with this guy who's trying to steal it, like the ultimate stalker, I guess you would call it. And then the rest of the band has to fight these zombies along with Shadowman. I almost said Darkman. Bring up some bad memories for you, Michael. Yeah, but he doesn't want to give away his secret identity at first, so he's just fighting, but then he eventually reveals that he knows about all this darkness, and the dark itself is Master Dark, who is like this, big bad voodoo daddy, if you will. Any fans of that band? My apologies. But but he is the one pulling the strings, trying to terrorize Shadowman. That's kind of like his ongoing thing at this time in the stories. So it's really interesting, though. There's a couple different things at play, right? One is that Steven Tyler, the lock of his hair and the clothes and all of that is part of a plot for this particular stalker. I think they call him Moon Boy or Moon Man or
something like that. I think it's Moon Boy, yeah.
So what was his plot, Michael? Do you recall what he wanted out of the deal with Master Dark?
So basically, they make a voodoo doll of Steven Tyler out of the lock of hair and the shrouds of clothes, because this Moon Boy wants to become Steven Tyler. And there's this interesting moment where the band is on stage and Steven Tyler's performing and singing, and all of a sudden he can't sing, and this guy is sitting up in the rafters, and he's like, I am becoming Steven Tyler, or something like that. Really, I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm following this journey where we're going.
Yeah, and so with that going on, also though, what's so funny is that they put this spell on Steven Tyler where he has to run and he
Mhm.
can't stop running. So he's running through the streets of New Orleans, and you have, Shadowman is chasing him, trying to help him, stop him. So, but he can't control himself. So he's fighting Shadowman. So Steven Tyler, like you say, he's a brawler in this,
Yeah,
man.
a
Those
jacked
Rolling
up,
Stones could
super
be a
strong
street
boy.
fighting man.
Yeah, it's
Basically, like so that whole thing is going on. Eventually they snap him out of it, and then Steven Tyler has to confront this guy who now literally, like, he has like painted on like Joker lipstick.
yes. And this is where I got confused for a minute because now, like, Shadow Man's got black hair. Steven Tyler's got black hair. This stalker has black hair. They all kind of look a little bit the same, other than this, guy kind of with this giant Joker smile. And I'm like, okay, what is going on? Who's fighting who? It's getting a little confusing, but it was interesting because, like, the idea is they're trying to get this voodoo doll away from this guy to get Steven Tyler back into control of his own body and everything, his own self.
Yeah, so that was what I would say was I felt was like the strongest point of this is they literally said, let's take a member of the band, let's make the story about him. Shadow Man is kind of a secondary character in
Yeah.
this, only he knows more than they do.
Right.
He knows what's going on, and like then he changes full into Shadow Man right during the process, and he talks about like, I'm trying to change my voice so they won't recognize me, so we don't know what type of voice he was putting on, but he's doing all that with them. And then at the end, it actually shows them, performing live and singing songs,
Yeah.
So you actually have like Aerosmith lyrics printed in the book and all of that. So yeah, so overall, like, this was a kind of a story where it could have been really stupid, and it wasn't. It was a
wasn't.
good one-off adventure.
Yeah,
We
it
could have
was
a guest star.
exactly. It was a good one-off standalone story. I would have liked to have known a little bit more about Shadow Man's backstory because, like, the idea behind a story like this is to entice rock and roll fans to want to buy a comic book. But you dive into this and you don't know who Shadow Man is, essentially. I would have liked it, maybe even if it was 2 or 3 panels, it's like a flashback to kind of establish that, which they do oftentimes in comics. I mean, they do it for Batman every couple of months, But other than that, as a standalone story, it was a good story. It was good art. It wasn't over the top, crazy action. You don't know what's going on. It had a small group of characters. It was a decent story. I was pleasantly surprised, and I was pleased that we chose to read this book because I basically said this to Adam in a I'm like, oh, did you see this cover? We got to talk about this. And then sure enough, here we are talking about it. And I'm glad I bought it. I bought it on Comixology for $1.99, and it was good. It was worth it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where Aerosmith also at this time, you got to recall, so they're in comic books. They were guesting on Saturday Night Live, but then also doing skits, on Wayne's World. Then they were in Wayne's World too.
Yes,
they were definitely just expanding their media reach at this time. And this album, Get a Grip, actually ended up being their biggest selling album of all time, worldwide.
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, this was their peak period here. The other thing I'll just bring up, though, is so in the back of the issue, there's a report that Steve Mazarski writes up where he's talking about, so obviously I have this connection with the band. So in addition to getting their likenesses in the comic, they actually came to a comic convention with us and they signed copies of this book and they got to meet the fans. And a lot of the people said, oh, I already saw you on tour a couple times and you're great, and so they were really excited to be involved with comic book fans. They thought it was a real neat environment to find themselves to be a part of. And so I think it's interesting that that crossover has tried to happen in even crazier ways. And there is a Marvel comic called Night Cat where Marvel was trying to create their own pop star superhero, which we got to cover someday.
Wait, didn't they have Dazzler?
Well, Dazzler was their original thing, right? Yeah, the late 70s. They're like, we're doing, Dazzler, as a movie. Oh wait, it didn't happen. It'll just be a graphic novel, and everything fell apart. But yeah, so they tried again in like the early 90s. So,
Oh boy, we'll
yeah.
get to stay tuned for that, guys, because we'll probably be getting to that one, I'm sure.
Yeah, but so we hope that you enjoyed this particular review. Hope that it caught your interest there. If you're an Aerosmith fan finding us for the first time, hey, come on, we're just comic book reviewers. We don't walk on water. Wait a minute. Is that Aerosmith or Ozzy Osbourne? I don't know. That's on the Butthead soundtrack by Ozzy Osbourne, but I'm getting my 90s rock groups mixed
You're mixing genres here. But as always, don't forget to check us out on our social media. On Twitter, it's at Wizards Comics. On Instagram, it's Wizards_Comics, and obviously here on YouTube as well. And you can check out our podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, on Podbean. Are we on Stitcher as well?
Yes.
We are. Okay, cool. I forgot about that. So we have lots of places you can check us out. We have tons and tons of content that we've come out with, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of cool guests we've had in the past. And we're going to be pumping out a lot more videos. And we're also going to be starting a Patreon soon in the start of 2021. And we'll have a ton of exclusive content there as well, which stay tuned for that. We'll put more of that information on both the podcast and the YouTube channel to get you geared up for that kind of stuff. Any other final thoughts on this comic?
The last thing I'll say is that in issue 26 of Wizard, after this issue came out, there's actually a picture of Gareb Shamus, the publisher of Wizard Magazine, with Steven Tyler. And he says, "Oh, hey, Mr. Mick Jagger, I'm such a big fan." It's pretty hilarious. So they were at the convention. Gareb was there. He made sure he was getting using his Valiant clout to get in there and get a picture. So.
He called Steven Tyler Mick Jagger. Oh, I can't wait to see that. I can't wait. That is fun. Okay. Wow, that's awesome.
But until next time, keep your books bagged and boarded.